can take this table a little bit forward. Yeah, so I can just keep it.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Brother KVL Kantarao will give a Telugu translation of this talk at Headquarters Hall behind. Second announcement, for those who are not yet really aware, Beauty Without Cruelty exhibition and a stall is there in the post office building, or Kasi Vilas as it's called, just next to the administrative building. Thank you.
Thanks, Brother Jay Kumar, for the announcements. Friends, good evening. Esteemed President, Brother Tim Boyd, Senior Theosophist in the Adyar Theatre, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me a great pleasure in welcoming you all in our today evening's lecture, which is on Panka Niyamas, the 5 laws of cause and effects. We all are seekers of the knowledge, wisdom. We believe that there is more to be learned by us, and we are not the complete, and we are on the path of theosophy. I am sure that all of us must have brought with them their mobile phones or the cell phones. Am I right? All of us, this tiny instrument is almost a necessity. But at the same time, in a talk like this, it gets disturbed to the others, and we do not want to disturb anyone, as we believe that we are for the care for the other brothers and everybody. So please switch off your mobiles or put it in a silent mode. That will help all of us, at least for 1 hour. Then you can switch on. I have a pleasant task of introducing our speaker for this evening, Venerable Orlando Ananda. He is an Ananda, but he is from Holland, so he is known as Orlando, who is living in Sri Lanka. His physical journey in this life has begun in January 1948 in Netherlands. Brother Ananda got his childhood education in Holland. He studied economics, sociology at the University of Amsterdam in Holland. Everyone present here knows about the Amsterdam, Holland. He was like normal student in his earlier life, going for a dance and politics, watching the TV, sports and everything. Then he desired to learn Hinduism, and he traveled to India. When he came to India, he has to take a visa. Visa expires, he has to go back again. When he was second time his visit in India, he had to go back out of India to get another visa. So he was traveling to Nepal, and while traveling to Nepal in the train, he came across a Buddhist monk who advised him that next time when you want to have a visa, why don't you travel instead of Nepal to Sri Lanka? He gave him the address and everything, and that is how his journey for Sri Lanka started. When he went there, he met his guru, Gnanasara Mahanayaka Thiru. Under his discipleship, he has learned the Buddhism, and his guru passed away in the last year in 2017 at the age of 102 years. Brother Ananda became a monk, that is ordination, in September 1975 at the age of 27 years at Pagoda in Sri Lanka. He went to an higher ordination in 23 months later in August 1977 at Sapugula in Sri Lanka. Brother Ananda has stayed at various places. Basically, he stays in Sri Lanka, but he has been traveling at various places. He has worked in the various capacities. He has conducted so many retreats, seminars, meditation sessions, and given the lectures. In fact, he has given a lectures at Adyar also earlier. He has traveled extensively in many of the countries, to name the few, like Sri Lanka, India, Germany, USA, UK, Bali, Japan, Pakistan, Indonesia, France, South Africa. The list will go on, but I don't want to go into that. He was the chairman for 8 years of Non-Chinese Seeking Coordinating Committee of Buddha's Light International Association. He is a member of International Network Engaged Buddhist. We, the delegates at the Theosophical Society's International Convention, and those who are coming regularly here, see him for many times. In fact, I was talking to him. He first came here in 1973. That's a year when I also came for the first time in 1973. And he has been having a deep understanding of T.S., Ancient Wisdom, J. Krishnamurti's teachings. I have a great pleasure in presenting you Brother Ananda, who will enlighten us on Panka Niyamas, the 5 laws of cause and effects. May I request him to deliver his thoughts to us. He can speak to us by sitting at his place. That's not an issue for us, or he can stand here, whatever is more convenient to him. And I present you, please, Brother Ananda.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Dear President Tim G, and your dear wife, and also the other members of the Theosophical Society board of, who are living here, international secretary, etc., etc. Also, all the members who are here, the delegates, visitors also, and viewers around the world. For the first time, I think, is that these proceedings can be seen live through the high-tech streaming. So, welcome to everyone. I would like to commence with a traditional chant, which is inviting the devas to participate in our lecture or talk or whatever we want to call it, being together here. Samanta Chakravalesu Atra Gacchantu Devata Saddhammang Munirajassa Sunantu Saggamokkadang Dhamma Savana Kalo Ayang Badanta Dhamma Savana Kalo Ayang Badanta Dhamma Savana Kalo Ayang Badanta. Today's topic for this talk is the Pancha Niyama, or the 5 laws of cause and effect, at least according to the Buddha's teachings. So let me first enumerate these 5 laws of cause and effect one by one, and then go into them afterwards in more detail. So we have what is called the Bija Niyama, which means the law of the seed. Our Indian friends know the word bija, meaning seed. Uttaniyama, the law of the climate or environment. Kammaniyama, the law of karma. Chittaniyama, the law of the mind. Dhammaniyama, the laws of nature. So these 5 are mentioned separately, but actually they are influencing each other. They're interactive, but for clarity's sake, they are mentioned separately, and we'll look at them one by one and then see how these teachers can be seen as influencing our daily lives and how perhaps we can change them or even transcend them, if at all. So the first one, Bija Niyama, the law of the seed, has to do with our biological inheritance, you could call it. What you inherit from your great-grandparents, grandparents, parents, etc. You know, the seed that comes down this lineage, and that makes us look in a particular way. Sometimes we look like our grandfather or grandmother, or maybe we inherit certain diseases also from them, like diabetes, for instance. And you know, in the human life this is the case, but also in the animal kingdom, of course, these lines of inheritance in the physical world go down in a similar way. So not only mammals but also insects, etc. So sometimes the insects may look like their father or mother. We can't tell the difference, but still, maybe they do. This also happens in other kind of spheres, and mainly let's focus on the human world. That is, you know, the seed of our parents has a great influence of what we are, physically at least. And then it also happens in the kingdom of the trees, for instance, the fruits. If you take the seed of a mango, let's say you have a mango seed, and you put it into the ground, and you give it enough water and sunlight and different kinds of nourishment, then after some time, a mango tree will come out, not a banana or a citrus fruit, most likely, unless, of course, a certain miracle happens. You know, there are exceptions to the rule. Like in the case of Sai Baba, we had a tree with 5 different fruits on one tree. But normally, the law of the seed goes like this. If you have a mango seed, you get a mango tree. That means the mango tree is already basically there in the seed. So this goes for all the living organisms. Then we have the Uttuniyama, or the law of the environment or the climate. Now, environment, kindly switch off your phones, don't... yes, thank you. So the law of the climate means the influence actually not only of the physical climate, like whether we live in a cold climate, you know, like Alaska or someplace, or Finland, or maybe in a tropical climate like Sri Lanka, but also the type of climate that is there socially. Socially, we grow up with certain peer groups and environment that is sometimes conducive to our upbringing and sometimes not so conducive to the upbringing. So the influence of friends and teachers, neighbors, neighborhoods, countries, that is all part of the climatic influences that we are experiencing in our lives. It has a great influence. Sometimes not only the social but also the economic climate. Certain countries, you may have a lot of chances to get ahead, so to speak, economically. You can achieve things by making an effort and have a chance to become, you know, affluent or something like that. And in some countries you don't have that. In certain countries there's no chance to do any business or make money or, no free choice at all. So that is the, let's say, the political climate also, not only the economic and the social, but the political climate also influences us. If you are born in a dictatorial country, for instance, you have very little chance of going ahead, unless you're really strong and very skillful, but otherwise that climate doesn't lead to much growth, sometimes also spiritually, of ourselves, if we grow up in such a climate. So the Uttaniyama, or the law of the climate and the environment, is very strong influence that we are either enjoying or suffering under. Then we have what is called the Kamma Niyama, or the law of karma. Now, just as we have in the Bija Niyama, the inheritance that we have from the seed and the biological influence from our parents and grandparents, here the karma is basically our own. The influence of karma that we have sown in the past. For instance, in the previous life, or the life before that, or many, many lifetimes, and also in this lifetime, we are still creating karma and also reaping the results of previous karma. So karma is a very complex law, which is very difficult to understand, and most of us don't even know what we did in this lifetime. Or do you remember what you had for breakfast on the 13th of October, for instance? Most of people don't know, unless you have cornflakes every day, of course, but something. But if you have a choice, then the kind of activities that we do, if they are just mechanical activities, they may not be karmic activities. But if they are accompanied by intention, then it becomes a karmic activity. The Buddha said, Chetanahang bhikkave kammang vadami. That means, chetana means intention. It is the intention which determines what kind of karma you create. And those intentions are classified in different ways, like skillful intentions and unskillful intentions. Skillful ones are those who lead to liberation, for instance, and to the good of yourself and of others. And unskillful intentions are those which are leading to suffering of oneself and of others. For instance, greed, hatred, jealousy, and things like that. In the other way, skillful ones are based on generosity, loving kindness, compassion, wisdom, and good qualities like that. So karma is a very complex thing, because not only one cause leads to an effect, but many causes can lead to a complex effect, and that effect again becomes a cause for a next effect. So if we cannot even remember what we did in this life, let alone what we did in previous lives, not only 1, 5, or 10, there must have been hundreds or thousands of previous lives. Therefore, the Buddha calls karma an achinteya, which means an unthinkable. With our limited, linear, so-called logical thinking, we cannot really grasp the whole topic of karma. But sometimes when something drastic happens to you and you don't know where it comes from, sometimes people who believe in karma, they say, well, it must have been some kind of karma. But what it is exactly, we don't know. And if that is your solace, like if you're satisfied with that, that may be a wise way of looking at it. Must have been some karma, we don't know. We don't say, why me, why he, why she, how did it happen, what happened to him or her. It seems so unfair, such a good person meeting such bad things in their life, and so on. Or a very bad person meeting very good things. And how does that tally with our logical mind? Doesn't. But there must be something called karma involved in this. So what it is exactly is not clear, but that doesn't take away that there is such a law of cause and effect, whether you like it or not. So the Kamma Niyama is that particular law. And karma is not some kind of super duper computer in the sky which keeps track of all your activities, like Saint Nicholas, or in Holland Sinterklaas, who knows exactly who has been good and who has been bad. But strangely enough, with our streams of consciousness, which seem to go on after our physical body dies, then the stream of consciousness, which we call Vijnana Solte, the stream of consciousness continues. And that stream of consciousness seems to contain the previous karmic seeds, and it continues like that into a new form, which we call the next life. So this karma takes place within that stream of consciousness, and then it expresses itself in thought, word, and deed. So next to this, these first three, bija, utu, and chitta, that is the seed, the environment, and the karma, we have a thing called chitta niyama, or the law of the mind. Now, as human beings, we claim at least that we are more advanced than animals, in the sense that we have minds, we have consciousness, we can make decisions, we can do something or not do it, or we can do something in a different way. We can think about something which maybe most animals cannot do. So in the evolution maybe of species, human beings are supposed to be higher evolved. Not that they are better than animals, you see. Some animals may be better than some human beings. But the chitta is something, the mind is something that distinguishes us from most other species. So, yeah, fortunately or unfortunately, we have this to make decisions. And then, of course, it depends on what kind of decision one makes. Now, the Buddha, after his enlightenment when he was 35 years old under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, he went over to Varanasi, and in Sarnath, a sort of suburb, you could say, of Varanasi, in the deer park, he gave a speech, his first speech to his 5 companions. And after that, he went back to his palace where he grew up as Prince Siddhartha, in a place called Kapilavastu, that is closer to the Nepali border. And there he met his little son, Rahula, and gave him some advice on how to decide what is good and what is bad, basically, which comes in here in Chitta Niyama, also in karma actually. And he said, son, before you say something and before you do something, just reflect briefly on the effect which this might have on the other and or yourself. If it's going to be harmful to the other person and yourself, don't say it, don't do it. Simple like that. If it's going to be harmful to the other person and only good for yourself, refrain from that action or those words, because it's going to harm the other person. And if it's going to be good for yourself and good for the other person, then go ahead, just do it, or just say it, because it will be good for both. And if it's going to be good for the other person, but a little bit hard for yourself, you can still consider to say it and to do it, maybe with some difficulty, but as a kind of help for the other person. What we call a kind of paramita, a good kind of quality. So in that way, you can choose, to express this thought takes about a minute or two, but when you take a deep breath and you only think, is this going to harm the other person? And then you know it. And then you either do it or you don't do it. That's quite simple. And that is actually a kind of observance of a lot of what is called ethical rules, sila in Buddhism and also in other kind of yama niyama type of teachings. Is it good for oneself and the other? Go ahead. If it's not, don't do it. And then there is another kind of law which we call Dhamma Niyama. In the Pali language, Dhamma. In Sanskrit and Hindi, Dharma. And most Western countries have chosen for Dharma. Now, Dharma has different meanings. When we say Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, for instance, Buddha, his teachings, and the Sangha, the monks and nuns, then it's not the same meaning. But Dhamma here means the law of nature, the natural laws. Like, for instance, the influence of the sun and the moon, the stars and the planets on life on Earth, on our lives. The planets and the sun and the moon, the stars, they have a lot of influence on us, even though we may not feel it immediately. And in places like Sri Lanka and India, almost everybody goes, as soon as a child is born, to the astrologer to get the, what is it called?
Horoscope.
The horoscope. So, the horoscope is a very important thing in these countries, to see what kind of possibilities and probabilities we may have in our life. That is based on the position of the sun, moon, the stars, the planets, including Rahu and Ketu, we've never seen, but anyway, there are such influences. And very often, if you consult the horoscope after some time, when something drastic happens, then you say, hey, yes, it was supposed to happen like that. But we think as human beings, especially with this Chitta Niyama, that we as human beings have a free choice. And how far are we free in our choices is yet another question. Our choices are very often based on all the previous factors which already have been determined. Like the past, even though, the past is past, it's gone, and therefore we cannot change it. So all that which comes from the past is also determining the future. But in how far are we free to make our choices? I think in Hinduism there's a simile of a cow which is tied to a pole by a rope, and the cow can only go this far this way and this far that way, but it is actually determined in its freedom by that rope and the pole. So, for instance, if you go to Nadi Grantams, Nadi Grantams, those are books based on the astrology, which were written down long ago, maybe 1,000 years ago, by Agastya, mostly Agastya, Saint Agastya. And then you find that your name and the name of your children may be in that book which was written 1,000 years ago. Whereas we think in the West we go to the town hall and we look in a book to choose a name for our children, and then we give them a name. Or we go in Sri Lanka, people go to the local priest, the Buddhist monk and ask for a good name for the child. But then that name is already there in those books, so how far are we free in choosing a name or in doing anything? Which doesn't mean, of course, that you have to just sit down or lie down under the mango tree until the ripe mango falls into your mouth, so to speak. You know, we have to do something, and we have to do the right thing at the right time in the right way. It's not like those two boys, you know, like they are Boy Scouts, two Boy Scouts, little story to wake you up from your slumber. You know, two Boy Scouts, they want to do a good deed every day, and they go out, and then in the evening they come together, and they compare notes, and one says, hey, I did a very good deed. Oh, what did you do? This one boy says, I helped an old lady to cross the street. Oh, very good, very good. Then he said, yes, you know, but it took me 45 minutes. Why did it take you so long? Well, she didn't really want to cross the street, you see. So be careful. When you want to do good, you have to do it in the right way, at the right time, to the right person, you know. So that is skillful action. Anyway, the laws of nature, they also play in events like earthquakes and tsunamis, for instance, you know, and other natural phenomena, which some people say, well, hello, very pedantly she's going there. So anyway, the events that happen in the earth, for instance, and also the influence of like sunspots, for instance, sun flares on the even the economy in the world, and also the events that happen in the world, they are determined by natural kind of events, not so much that we can say everything is our karma. That's why the Buddha has sort of separated these laws, that not everything is bija, not everything is karma, not everything is, you know, this, that, or the other, but these are all interacting with each other, and somehow or other, now of course, if you look at it as a teaching for liberation, then we can say, well, bija, or the seed, is something that is given. We cannot really change that, unless, of course, we are going into genetic engineering. Yes, that is, of course, a change of the course of life, which is now going on, actually, now with the experiments in China also, especially. And anyway, the other kind of things, the past karma, and the past influences of the climate, we cannot really change. But what we can change is our own attitude towards the given events, our reactions, for instance. Do we base our actions and reactions on anger, fear, greed, hatred, jealousy, or on something like generosity and loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity, patience, wisdom, and things like that? If we do that, then sometimes we can actually change the chain of events. In the case of the Buddha, there's a little story, don't know exactly whether it's true or not, but it is a nice little story where an astrologer who was also a palmist came to the banks of the river Ganges, and near Varanasi, and was following. He said, hey, there's a footstep here which is very extraordinary. This is not just any footstep, let me follow it. And he followed it and found at a certain point a monk looking like a beggar sitting there. But he said, excuse me, could I have a look at your feet? You know, the soles of your feet also have these lines. And then he said, oh, but you should have been king. Then the Buddha, who was sitting there, said, I could have become a king, but I transcended the law of cause and effect. You see? Well, what comes to my mind is actually the scene of after the birth, at the name-giving ceremony of Prince Siddhartha, the astrologer Asita, he was asked about the Buddha's, about Prince Siddhartha's life, and he said, oh, he's going to be a great man, he's going to be a great ruler. And the king, his father, was very happy. He said, but that is if he stays in the palace, but he will not stay in the palace. He will become an enlightened being, a Buddha, which his father didn't quite like, but what to do? So, even in that, the astrologer could see that was going to happen, maybe from his lines in his feet and from his astrological chart. So, anyway, if we can transcend these laws, that is the final goal of our samsaric journey, by understanding them, maybe looking at them, maybe not suppressing them. There are some schools that are trying to suppress our negativities. In the Buddha's summing up of his teachings, he says, Sabba papasa akaranang kusalas upasampada satchitta paryodapanang etang buddhanusasanang. That means to try to sabba papasa akaran, not to do the unskillful things. That's one thing, which doesn't mean to suppress them, but to let go of them. And then kusalasa upasampada, to try to improve and increase the skillful things, the good things. And satchitta paryodapanang, to cleanse your mind. That is the teaching of all Buddhas. So it goes. It's a short stanza, which is very often quoted. So, this is more or less what I want to say about this particular topic of Panchaniyamas, but there's something more which I would like to explore, namely Buddhist perspectives on beauty and the field beyond, which I think is the theme also here of this gathering. And also maybe compare some of these expressions of the Buddha's teachings with teachings of, for instance, J. Krishnamurti, some Zen maybe as well. Now, the Buddha has classified truth, which is one of these terms, not truth and beauty. Truth in two different ways. One is sammuti satya, or the relative truth. And another one is called the Paramartha Satya, which is the transcendental or the absolute truth. So some things are true, but not eternally. They may be existing, but they're changing. So in the relative truth, the beauty may be, for instance, in seeing beautiful objects, hearing beautiful and pleasant sounds, like classical music, Eastern or Western, and the sound of the birds, the ocean, and maybe waterfall, etc. Or also, it may entail the experience of nice smells, pleasant fragrances, either natural or artificial, like the smell of the rose, or a beautiful flower, or artificial scents, perfumes which entice the senses, especially the sense of smell, and then it may conjure up mental images that are related to that smell, and either in the present or some memories of previous smells, and it ends in imagination. So it may be very pleasant, but it is temporary. Then it could also mean the experience of good food, depending on one's taste, of course, either spicy or bland, sweet, sour, or bitter. And a subtle combination of it, vegetarian, vegan, or otherwise. And then you may have tactile sensations, the sense of touch, coming in contact of the skin with different kind of objects, either hard or soft, cold or warm, which give us a sensation of pleasantness and associations with beauty of the world. And finally, it could be the contact from within with our own thoughts of beauty, either worldly or philosophical or otherworldly. And then there is a saying that beauty is within the beholder. So that means that it is not so much the external object that is perceived, but a kind of mental setup of the beholder that determines whether something is beautiful or not. Some things may be beautiful to one person and maybe not to another. So why did the Buddha call all these forms of beauty as relative truth, the Sammuti Satya? Well, because all these things as objects of the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue and the body and the mind, they are all conditioned and they are not really able to give us lasting happiness because they are actually worldly pleasures. They are unsatisfactory in that sense. They are not eternal. They can't satisfy us for a long time. And we call them non-self. That is a Buddhist concept which is called anatta. The Buddha was called the anattavadin, or the non-self philosopher. The self or the Atman in Hinduism is one thing, and in Buddhism we call anatman, non-self. So when we are talking about, for instance, all these relative things, such as body, feelings, and what you call thoughts and sounds, etc., they are maybe, and also our own actions. For instance, I am the creator of my own karma, and I am the recipient of the previous karma. The Buddha uses the word atta or atman, the self. But that particular self, he says, is not an eternal, everlasting, unchanging self or soul. That is all changing. Therefore it's called anatta. But the Buddha also said there is something which is called the unconditioned. The unconditioned, or asankata dharma in Sanskrit. Asankata dharma is something which is beyond all these relative things of the senses and all these things which we can see and hear and smell and taste and think. And therefore the Buddha says, because that is there is an escape from the round of rebirths. If that unconditioned something would not be there, then we would just be continuing according to the law of cause and effect endlessly in this round of rebirth. But because there is such a thing as the unconditioned, we can escape from that round of rebirth. Well, if that is your cup of tea, of course, there are others who say, I will postpone my exit of the round of rebirth as long as there are suffering beings. Let me be a bodhisattva and continue rebirth again and again and again, not because I like the samsara so much, but to be able to help other beings, which is a very high and a beautiful aim in Mahayana Buddhism, especially more emphasized than in Theravada Buddhism. So the field of the real truth and beauty really lies beyond and beneath all these objects. And the subjective experience, that field of truth and beauty, is not conditioned by sights and sounds, smells, feelings, or touch, or thoughts. It's rather a realm that is already within oneself. It's not outside oneself, which one can discover. It can be uncovered when one is is sensitive to it. Now I would like to just quote a little poem which is about beauty. It's called The Wayside Flower. There grows a little flower by the way, and sheds its sweetness on the passer-by, and many a tired traveller stays to rest where it is nigh. It grows beside the dusty road of life, and lifts a trustful face to God above, thrice strong the soul that breathes the sweetness of the flower of love. Then there is a famous author, which you probably know, Erich Fromm, who has talked about psychoanalysis and Zen Buddhism. Now, he thought that the essential point is that psychoanalysis and Zen Buddhism subscribe to the same aim. For the author, the aim of Zen is enlightenment, the immediate, unreflected grasp of reality without affective contamination and intellectualization, the realization of the relation of myself to the universe. According to Fromm, that was the core of Zen, and he says it is the same of psychoanalysis. Well, I doubt actually whether it is. Psychoanalysis seems to be good for the psychiatrist, basically, the pocket of the psychiatrist. It can take many years to try and analyze, whereas Zen is much more direct, Vipassana is much more direct. Maybe we don't think that much about the problems, but we transcend them basically through meditation and awareness, not so much through linear thinking, until we might come to a moment of, aha, then it's about $10,000 down the road. So anyway, there is psychoanalysis in Zen Buddhism, and there's also Alan Watts. Alan Watts, he was also a great Buddhist in a way. He lived, I think, in Sausalito, across the bay, across the bridge in San Francisco. And he wrote also books on Buddhism together with Erich Fromm as well. And he discussed one particular word here, which is called ta-ta-ta. Now, ta-ta-ta is not like ta-ta-ta, ta-ta-ta-ta, but you know, it is a Sanskrit word which means thusness. It is as it is. And that is apparently the way that an enlightened Buddha sees the things as they really are. Now, unenlightened people don't see the things as they really are. We usually, as unenlightened people, we project something like a permanency onto impermanent things. Things are impermanent, that means they're changing all the time. And then we hope that they will remain the same. So we project that permanency, but then of course we get disappointed because after some time things change. We cannot keep them the way we want. For instance, when the first tooth is falling out, or the hair becomes gray, or something like that, or a situation changes, or one loses a friend or a relative, and things like that. So things they are not really permanent, but we would like to be permanent. And in some cases people say, oh, I know, my body is not permanent, my feelings are not permanent, my thoughts are not permanent, but at least let my consciousness be permanent. And they hope that the consciousness is permanent and lives somewhere forever and ever. Amen. So that also may not be the case. Depends, of course, what consciousness we are talking about. So, but anyway, in the book Buddhism and Psychoanalysis, East and West, written by Erich Fromm and D.T. Suzuki and DeMartino, a Latin American psychologist, it illustrates different approaches of the analytical Western mind and the observant, non-judgmental Oriental mind. In the very beginning of the book, there are two little poems, also called Flower by the Wayside. The first one is by Tennyson, and it said something like, "Oh, flower by the wayside, I wish I could understand you. Let me take you apart, petal by petal, and then I'll be able to understand you." Typically Western, you see. So, but then the other little haiku type of poem by a Japanese author, it says, "Oh, flower by the wayside, I saw you and I became one with you." That was it. And strangely enough, this poem I read in a book from friends whom I was visiting in Holland just after having a similar experience. Strangely enough, in Holland there are some hills. I was going up a hill, not a very big one. I was a bit tired. In Hilversum, by the way. So there I stopped, and there was a blooming bush just there where I had my bicycle. And suddenly the time stopped, and space was also like one. And I don't know exactly how long it lasted, and then after that I went on and I saw this book, and there it was, Flower by the Wayside. So I thought, wow. And that may have been my first introduction to Buddhism, I suppose. So now in J. Krishnamurti's teachings, I don't want to let that go unmentioned, especially in this environment. J. Krishnamurti, he would find many references in his works about the otherness, especially when he was alone. The otherness, that other dimension, it was there, and it came unexpectedly when there's no self or ego that expects anything, no center, no circumference. Then he was experiencing something beyond time, basically. And probably this could be the unconditioned state, as we call it, of mind, which is already basically within. You don't really need to go anywhere to find it. You don't need to become anything to go there. And you don't need to do anything special, but just being where you are. Which doesn't mean that you can't become a doctor or a scientist or an architect, not that kind of becoming. But the projection into the future and not being satisfied with what you do, with what you have, with what you are, that when that comes to a halt, Buddha calls it bhava nirodho nibbānam. When bhava, or the process of becoming, comes to a halt, nirodha, that is called nirvana. Now just to close this, I think we have just a little, yes. There is a school of Buddhism which is called the mind-only school of Buddhism. Chittamatra is called. Now the mind-only school of Buddhism says that mind is the only reality and matter is an illusion. So I say, well, when you walk into a wall, you get a certain sensation of reality. Boom, sort of, yeah. Even if you close your eyes, the wall is still there. It doesn't disappear because you have closed your eyes. So I have created a thing called the Nevermind School of Buddhism. And it goes like this. Mind is mind, matter is matter. Mind is not matter, and matter is not mind. Mind does not matter, and matter does not mind. So never mind, it doesn't matter. Thank you. Is it allowed, one question?
Yes, I think so. We can have one question, not more than one. Yes, Sharmaji.
Yes.
From the books of Buddha, one question only, sir, that is answered I will find.
What is your question, please? Can you say your question? I can hear you.
For 1 hour I have heard, now let me just listen to my own question and take it out. The book of silence of my grandmother, Madam Slavati, is a book which has awakened me. This book is so important to me, I'm sure everybody has read it. Page number 23 and 24 and 35. Only one question in that. Inner sound, voice of silence, whole book. The essence is clear to me. If it's clear to somebody else, I will touch his feet and learn from him. If somebody has got something more than this, but I have asked this question to many people earlier also, no answer has been given. Unheard is a word I know for many years. Unheard, unstuck sound in the head. Okay, everywhere. No, I have been getting this sound for many years. But after reading this book, Voice of Silence, page 23, 24, 24, there are 7 types of sounds which are given in sequence which as we Gayatri Madam says, these sounds are, I read this, 41, page 23, before you set the foot upon the ladder upper rung, the ladder, the mystic sound that have to...
Excuse me. Excuse me, no. Excuse me, I thought you were going to put one question. Now it's a long discourse. I'll meet you after the meeting, okay?
Captain Sharmaji, after the meeting you can meet him and ask the question.
Yeah.
Huh?
And I think The Sound of Silence is one of the best books that there is. And it has to do with the pineal gland and all that kind of thing.
Yes, if you are interested in all the audience to know, then please ask at the question answer sessions that we have during this convention. And not at this time because we are constrained with the time. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, thank you.
Please be seated. Yes, on behalf of all of us, let me say that he has traveled us to the Pancha Niyamas and explained in a most lucid language which a ordinary person can also understand. Like we have the seeds, we have the karma, we have the so many things, and he has explained us that why there is a differentiation and why the change is required and changes is taking place. We are not to be just carried away with one thing. The changes are necessary. On behalf of the Theosophical Society, I present him a memento as a mark of our remembrance. This session is closed. Now the next session at 7:30 at the Blavatsky Bungalow, we have the inauguration. Thank you very much.
shine people onto the world, which is terrible.
Can we have the touch people here just for one photo?
Fíjate, video.
No problem, no problem.
No, psychotherapy. Psychotherapy is Eric Fromm and Day2 Session2 and De Martino. De Martino. Suzuki, yeah, Day2 Session2.
Can we have one picture?